Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty huge, something humans have been wondering about forever, really.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Consciousness, like how does it actually, happen?
Right.
You've brought some really cool stuff to look at for this, kind of mapping things out from like the tiniest bits of the universe all the way to our own experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our mission, I guess, is to see if we can find the best clues in all of this about how something so subjective
hmm
could actually come from, well, the physical world.
Yeah, it is a pretty grand idea, you know. Looking at everything from those fundamental building blocks of the universe
Right.
to the brain and all its complexity. I think if we can find those key moments, those influential theories,
Yeah.
we might be able to understand at least some of the ways it could work.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, the very, very beginning.
Okay.
Subatomic particles,
Right.
they form atoms, then molecules, and we end up with things like DNA, which is described as this like informational blueprint. So how do we get from basic information like that to consciousness?
Well, the interesting thing is, even at that basic level, we see information being encoded.
Yeah.
DNA, it's like instructions for building everything, right?
Yeah.
Including the brain. And we think the brain is essential for consciousness.
So it's like the potential for consciousness is already there.
Sort of, yeah. It's kind of embedded in that molecular code.
And it's not static, right? Things are happening.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we move up to the cellular level,
Right.
and there's this wild thing, the zinc spark, when an egg is fertilized, and then these calcium waves that follow.
Exactly.
So we have these really early signals, these energetic events.
It's like the first communication, in a way.
Do you think there could be some link between that and the electrical activity we see in the brain later on?
You know, that is a really interesting connection to think about.
Yeah.
These early events are essential for development, no question. So it's possible, maybe even likely, that these initial rhythms, the signaling at the cellular level, it's like setting the stage energetically for the more complex electrical stuff we see later in the brain.
Like a foundation.
Yeah, like a foundation.
Yeah.
It definitely hints at dynamic activity being important right from the start.
Which brings us to the brain and, brainwaves.
Ah, yes.
Different frequencies, like what are they, delta, theta?
Delta, theta, alpha, and gamma.
Right, and each one goes with a different state of awareness.
Precisely.
Gamma waves, those are the ones linked to focus, right?
Especially, yeah.
So it's like those early cellular rhythms have become these like super sophisticated patterns in the brain.
Exactly. And if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture,
Yeah.
those brain waves, they're really reflecting all these neurons firing together in sync.
Oh.
And those higher frequency gamma waves, they probably represent a ton of coordination.
Wow.
Potentially the kind of integrated information processing that you need for conscious awareness.
Okay, so this integration idea is a big part of the integrated information theory, or IIT.
Yeah, one of the big ones.
The idea is that consciousness comes from how well a system can integrate information. And they measure that with something called phi.
Phi, yeah.
So basically, it's like, how much is the system doing more than just the sum of its parts?
Exactly.
And the brain, it's so interconnected, it seems to fit that idea really well.
Yeah, that's one of the key insights of IIT, you know.
Okay.
Systems that are really interconnected, like our brains. They have a huge capacity for that integration, for processing information in a way that's more than just the parts.
And IIT says that is consciousness.
That's the claim, yeah. And one of the interesting things about it is it suggests that maybe consciousness isn't just limited to brains.
Really?
In theory, anything complex enough, integrated enough, could have it, whether it's biological or not.
That's pretty wild.
It is.
So we also have the global workspace theory.
GWT, yep.
And that's coming at it from a different angle.
Right. Kind of, yeah. GWT focuses more on information being accessible. That's the key for consciousness.
Okay.
So for something to be consciously perceived, it has to enter this, it's called the global workspace.
Like a central stage.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Yeah.
it becomes available to all these different parts of the brain.
So like memory, perception, action.
All of that, yeah. It's like broadcasting the information.
But all this activity, these networks, the broadcasting, there's got to be a physical side to it.
Absolutely.
And that's where we get the neural correlates of consciousness, the NCCs.
Right, the NCCs are like the physical footprints of consciousness, the actual activity in the brain that goes with specific experiences.
And some areas come up a lot, right?
Definitely, like the prefrontal cortex and the posterior parietal cortex.
Okay, so we're figuring out the physical parts, the machinery. The But then we hit this really big question.
Yeah.
It's called the hard problem of consciousness.
Right.
It's like, why do those neurons firing, why does all that integrated information actually feel like something?
Exactly. It's the question of qualia.
Qualia, that's like...
The raw experience. Like, what does it feel like to see blue?
Yeah, like we can describe the brain activity.
We can map it out perfectly.
But why does it feel blue?
That's the mystery.
It's like there's this gap between what we know objectively about the brain and what's happening subjectively inside.
Right. And that gap is really hard to explain.
And maybe this is where emergentism comes in.
Ah, yes. Emergentism.
It's a philosophical idea,
It is.
but it says maybe consciousness comes from these complex interactions, but it's not just reducible to the parts.
Right. It's more than just adding up the parts.
So it's like a new property that emerges from the complexity.
Exactly. So with emergentism, consciousness is seen as this emergent property of the brain.
Not just the neurons firing.
Right, but the whole intricate network, the way it all works together.
So we've gone from particles to atoms, molecules, cells, brains, and now to this idea of consciousness as something that emerges.
Quite a journey.
It really is. The physical side of it is becoming clearer.
For sure.
But that subjective experience, that feeling, it's still a huge mystery.
It really is. I mean, we've traced a possible path, right?
Yeah?
From the information in DNA, those first signals, to the way the brain integrates everything. But the hard problem is a big reminder that understanding how the brain works is only part of the puzzle.
So as you go about your day, think about this.
Okay.
Think about those first energetic events way back at the beginning and all the crazy complex information processing happening in your brain right now. Could there be a connection between that very first spark and the thoughts you're having at this very moment?
It's a fascinating thought.
It really is. Thanks for diving into this with me. It's been amazing.
That's a pleasure.
I hope you all enjoyed this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.